Hello guys, and welcome to our first ever list video where I'll go through the entire season of some of these shows that I've been covering every week, and I'll talk about some of my favorites and some of the ones that I really dislike. So of course, being the video is the best and worst Family Guy episodes, the best 5 and worst 5, I'm going to go through the worst 5 first, then I'm going to go through the best 5, and then I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a season kind of thoughts thing, like where I sum up my thoughts about the season overall and whether you should watch it or not if you haven't. So if you haven't seen any of these episodes, just be aware there are spoilers. So I don't want to keep you waiting. Let's get started. So at number 5, at worst, we have The Young Parent Trap. In case you didn't know, this is a Peter and Lois episode where they become kind of millennial parents after some younger parents start talking to them at Stewie's school and they want to be hip and young. And, because Meg and Chris have no parents to take care of them, then they try to take them down as a result. And then, like, there's kind of a subplot where Stewie's kind of hanging out with preschoolers, and then they're in a pool and they all drown. So, I watched this episode twice. The first time I couldn't finish it, to be honest, but I think it's bad, but it's not like the worst of the season, mainly because I think the story is kind of okay. It's pretty coherent, but it's not really interesting or funny. Like, most of this episode was just a millennial joke machine, and only maybe one of 10 of the jokes landed for me. Like, I like the treatment business joke, especially when it turns out Meg secretly operated a business behind Chris' back. I really like that one. I got a good laugh when Stewie asked the 6-year-old boy questions. And there's also a cutaway with some guy in Africa. He's running like Peter Griffin did in season 2 for the Chocolate Factory episode, and he's running and then he falls and he does the Peter Griffin thing, like and I thought that was amusing as well, even if it's a repeat. But I think the plot is a little bit incoherent, but it's more coherent than some of the others. Like, some of the gags were pretty connected, but I didn't like this episode that much. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. It's not good. So at number 4, we have Tales of Former Sports Glory, Family Guy season 19 finale. This is an anthology episode with Peter, Quagmire, and Cleveland telling stories about their younger selves and how they were athletic and sporty after they can't watch sports on the TV because the cable's out at the bar. So this episode was really a letdown, mainly because none of it was really funny. I think the Peter one is more interesting than the rest, mainly because it has some jokes that kind of made me smile, like the one where he's living in Little Italy and then everything's small, even his apartment where only his fingers fit. That one got a good laugh out of me. I think there's another one, but I honestly don't really remember. But the other two, like Quagmire and Cleveland, were not interesting. I wasn't bought or sold into them, mainly because like the details of the shows are really inconsistent. Like Quagmire's, his parents are totally don't look like his real dad, or his dad before he became transgender. But there's just so many details like that really don't get me interested in the thing. And also, it has that super long, dragged on joke with Quagmire bouncing the tennis ball 40 times. And that's when I knew they pretty much gave up on it. There's also the Cleveland one where he's a baseball player from Cuba and he moves to the US to continue his baseball career. And then when he gets too big, he suddenly quits. Like, it's not really interesting. I don't buy the details that he's from Cuba. It feels kind of bullshit, to be honest. I mean, maybe you guys could have got more out of it, but it didn't do anything for me. There was also a 911 joke in this episode that some people said was pretty offensive, but it didn't even elicit a reaction from me. And I think that's how that's how mundane and boring it was. It didn't elicit any reaction out of me. So yeah, I didn't like this one. It sucked. So let's move on. Our third worst is La Famiglia Guy. This one has Peter owing a debt to the mafia, or like, no wait, he becomes a mafia boss, and then like he pretends to be one, so then the real mafia then, you know, threaten to kill him or something. And then on the side, I think, and then on the side, they have, I think it was some joke about Brian. I honestly don't remember. Oh, okay. I don't think there was a subplot. So, yeah, that's how bad it was. I literally forgot what happened. So yeah, I didn't like this one. It wasn't funny at all. Like, the only time I smiled was the extra virgin olive oil joke, because that one was surprisingly pretty good, and I liked Stewie's toy horse on the bed. Because, you know, after Peter finds out that the mafia is going after him, and he opens his bed, he sees a horse's head, and he screams, and then Stewie's like, there, it's his toy horse. But, like, those two are probably the only jokes that I smiled at, which is why it isn't lower on the list. But, yeah, the rest was terrible. Like, how many times did Brian die in this episode? He died 4 times. Seriously. It's not funny. It's not funny, especially since they come back to life. You know, because it's Family Guy, so, you know, when they die, it's not funny. It's like, I mean, you could have had Brian actually die, like, in Life of Brian, but here he just dies, and then he comes back. It's just pointless. I thought the ending was terrible. It had some Prego jar save Peter. It's like, it just came out of the blue. There was no thought, no plan into it. It just came out. I didn't like it. Sending Chris to Italy was stupid. Like, it first started out as a cutaway, and then it turned into a kind of subplot. But it doesn't really do anything. It's not funny. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I did not like this one either. On second, we have Boys and Squirrels. I really did not like this episode. Mainly, it's about Stewie and Brian trying to care for a squirrel, I think. No, Chris and Stewie care for a squirrel, and then Peter gets his spine fixed, and because his spine's fixed, he becomes way taller than he already is. So, I said I didn't like this one, mainly because it didn't really get a reaction out of me, because nothing was funny. It was predictable, especially like, oh, Brian ends up eating the squirrel or attacking it. Like, it sucked. Like, the two plots don't go anywhere. The saran wrap joke, especially, that was terrible. It's like, he's trying to do the saran wrap. Okay, it's you know, I have trouble doing saran wrap too sometimes, but it goes on for like 2 whole minutes, and it doesn't really do anything that's funny or interesting. But I did like the Sears closing down forever. And then Lois talking about podcasts, and then she faxed the message to Bonnie. Those are the only 2 jokes that got a smile out of me. But the rest, like, I had no reaction. It was boring. This may have been one of the worst episodes I've seen from the show, mainly because it's so boring. And the subplot is surprisingly even worse, mainly because it introduces an idea of, oh, okay, Peters has a spine problem, and then the doctor fixes it, and he's taller, which is fine. And then they go to a roller coaster, and he's too tall. He's too tall, so he starts kicking on the rides and stuff like that. Because, you know, the rides aren't very high, and, you know, he's taller, so his feet can kick other people as they're riding. And then it ends in the most lazy way possible with Lois yelling at Peter about all the things that he does that are dumb, and then he shrinks every time, and it's like, there's no thought into this. It's kind of like with the last episode. I feel like there's no thoughts put into these endings. Like, I mean, I get that Family Guy doesn't really end very well, but, like, at least with those episodes, there's some thought put into how they should end. With this episode, I fail to see that. So, yeah, this one's definitely one of the worst this season, or maybe one of the worst of modern Family Guy, to be honest. And at number 1, we have And Then There's Fraud. This one is an episode where Peter and Chris get into the memorabilia business, and what else? And Stewie gets plastic surgery. That's pretty much it. So, yeah, I hated this episode. Like, I really hated it. It was probably one of the worst I've seen from the show in a long... Well, I mean, other than Better Off Meg, this might be one of the worst I've seen in quite some time. Mainly because I think the cutaways are all terrible. None of them are funny. The story is wafer thin. Like, at least with the Young Parent Trap, there's a little bit of consistency, even though it feels a little bit like sporadic jokes. There's a little bit of consistency, but here it's not there. I think the Meg subplot with her just being abused is not funny. Honestly, I thought the Meg abuse got old a long time ago, to be honest. Like, it was funny the first time, and the second time, okay, yeah, sure, it's funny the fifth time, but when you get to the 100th time, it's like, this is not funny. Like, it's not. Like, it's like playing that joke all over and over again, and like you expect them to laugh every single time. No, it doesn't work like that. Comedy needs to be kind of like an immediate thing where you start laughing because of how not predictable it is, or if it's predictable but it's delivered kind of in a different way that makes it sort of funny. And that Meg plot doesn't offer that. It's just a rehash of every time she's been abused. It's not funny. I thought the part with Peter and Chris losing their heads was terrible. It's just pointless gore. Actually the main plot was sort of okay, but it was inconsistent and it had a lot of awful jokes. And the subplot was terrible. I don't have much to say about the subplot. It's just lazy. Because, Stewie gets plastic surgery, and then somehow he doesn't get it. And then he undoes it. It's like, I mean, to be honest, if you want me to say something good, I did like in the beginning that he said, yeah, he thought he was old because, because someone thought he was 3, so he thought he was old. Because surprisingly, the episode started out okay with that, but then none of it was really funny after that. Except maybe when you're saying, I guess, like when Dr. Hartman said plastic surgery Stewie was Daryl Hannah, that kind of got a chuckle out of me, or a smile. And I kind of did like Stewie's skin falling off during the portrait, even though, yeah, you could argue it's pointless gore, but it was just unexpected that I could have kind of got a smile or a chuckle out of it. And then in the main plot, there's only maybe one laugh, but it ends very quickly. It's the part where Joe makes Peter buy expensive gum to use the bathroom, so he buys it, which I thought was pretty funny because, Joe has a store in his house, which is funny, right? But then it gets lame quickly when he has to repeat the numbers to the bathroom, and he does it like 3 times. It's not funny. Like, it's just taking up time, and that's not even the worst part of this episode. Mainly because the worst part is the Hudson brothers montage. Like, it's lazy. It's not even a reiteration. It's reposting the clip and using it as part of the episode just to fill time. It took 2 minutes. 2 minutes, guys. That's not funny. It's lazy. At least with the other awful cutaways and jokes, they try something. They try something. But here, they don't try anything. They just insert. Okay, let's insert. It's one of the laziest episodes of a show I've ever seen in comedy, and yeah, this episode is terrible. I don't have much more to say because everything I say is going to be negative. So I want to list a quick few honorable mentions for the worst as well. I didn't like Stewie's first word either, but I thought it's not on this list mainly because it does have a couple good jokes, and the story kind of gets coherent later on, but it's sort of amusing, unlike these 5. I didn't like the first Noel, mainly because that's a rehash of the first Christmas episode, and it wasn't nearly as good. So those would be my 2 for second picks for the worst of the season, if you could fit 7 spots. So, I'm done being negative. Let's try to be as positive as we can. So, at number 5 on our best list is The Marrying Kind. and this one has Peter and Chris go to eat breakfast buffets after they get obsessed with them at a hotel in New Orleans. Meanwhile, Stewie gets a mail-in bride. So, I thought this episode wasn't bad at all, mainly because I thought the setup was pretty solid, even though the song was pretty stupid. So I like the setup, and I like how it diverts into two kind of plots. With Stewie's plot starting with the wedding in New Orleans, after Mort gets married to another lady after his other wife died, and then once Peter and them see that. But once Peter and them go to Mort's wedding and they get addicted to the breakfast buffet, they start going to every hotel. So I like how it splits up into two plots. As for the subplot, which is the breakfast buffet, I like seeing them splurge, but I didn't like the ending to it because, I guess it was okay, but then they start eating and then I think Peter rats Chris out and then they both go to jail. They go to jail for 15 years just for stealing food, which is kind of unreasonable, but I guess at the same time it's supposed to be amusing. I didn't really care for it, but it was fine. There's some random jokes like the agent killing the two Finnish men that I didn't like, or the squirrel next to the very redundant hotel sign. I didn't like that one either. I'm not sure why they continue to do that, mainly because none of that stuff has ever clicked with me, or I don't even think it's funny. But maybe other people think it's funny, it might just be me. I thought the Stewie plot was surprisingly pretty good until they decided to have Brian bang the wife because, the predictable twist where Brian gets with a girl. It's kind of similar to that episode in season 8, except with Lois, when Meg gets a boyfriend and then when Meg goes away, Lois ends up banging the boyfriend. It's sort of the same thing here. I'm just really tired of, Brian revolving around that single character trait of, he's gonna hook up with girls and have sex with them. It was fine back then, but now it's just overplayed out. It's boring. It's predictable. But it does kind of have a nice compromise, even though the wife ends up leaving Stewie and going somewhere else. I thought the cutaways were terrible. Peter trying to get into a kid's party wasn't all that great. But I did like that Meg yelled at Lois that she understood what she said. I thought that was probably the best joke in the episode. So overall, the episode it wasn't actually that bad because I liked how structured it was. It's just not that funny, but it's certainly my top 5. So number 4 is PeTerminator. This one is a Stewie and Brian adventure episode where they have to go back in time because of some broken relationship, I believe. Yeah, they have to go back in time because a future Stewie. There's a PeTerminator robot that wants to destroy the Stewie. So Stewie and Brian have to go on a Terminator mission kind of thing, and they kind of go back into the future kind of thing. So yeah, I actually surprisingly, even though this episode was great by many, it wasn't all that great to me. I thought it was good, but it wasn't like, oh wow, I was amazed. But it was surprisingly pretty good. I did like how it's story driven, because Family Guy doesn't really do story driven episodes, but they're always a solid watch. Big Trouble in Little Quahog is one of my favorite recent episodes just because of how story-driven it is. It's the same thing with Throw It Away from Family Guy, the one where Lois gets obsessed with decluttering her house. I really like that episode mainly because of how story-focused it is. It doesn't deal with no bullshit. It just gets straight into the plot, and there's really not a lot of nonsense. And then with this episode, I also like the action scenes. The cold open, first of all, leads into a spooky futuristic version of the theme song, which I thought was really good. Again, the entire story was coherent and interesting. I liked it. The action scenes were awesome. I think the friendship thing was a little overplayed, but it's a reminder of how strong the Stewie Brian character dynamics are. I kind of like when they lean more into sci-fi concepts, mainly because I think, other than probably Futurama or Family Guy, was mainly the start of sci-fi concepts into animated shows for the most part, into adult animation shows. I think Rick and Morty kind of gets its influence I mean, even though Rick and Morty gets its direct influence from Back to the Future, you can kind of see it has some Family Guy influence, mainly because Stewie and Brian's sci-fi plot focus a lot on the characters, and Rick and Morty also has that as well. So, as for jokes, I liked some of them. Like the Cool Whip joke with the Uber was like funny. I like how they reference Rick and Morty and Big Mouth, like two really popular shows. So yeah, the meta humor in this episode kind of worked. But I didn't like Stewie trying to kiss Brian. I thought that was like really gross. The only thing that prevents it from getting even higher on this list is mainly the subplot where Peter tries to reach a tree. It's just pointless filler. It's a waste of time. I think they should have focused more on the story instead, or and show how Stewie and Brian ended up instead of having Peter trying to reach the tree, because I didn't think it was funny at all. And this episode was well animated. A lot of the stuff was good. I liked it. So yeah, nice. And now we're going on to number 3, the talented Mr. Stewie. This is a Stewie-focused episode where Stewie finds out that his bear Rupert ends up belonging to Chris. So because of that, then they break up. And then he goes on to this kind of spiritual journey kind of thing, and then he ends up missing Rupert, so he tries to get him back from Chris, and they end up going into a sort of fight, and it's actually really cool. The one thing I really like about this episode is just, again, how story driven it is. There's no cutaways in this episode, I believe. It just gets straight to the point. It's very story driven. It's funny throughout. One of my favorite jokes was probably when Stewie and Chris when Chris invites Stewie to eat pasta, and then they get into a fight over like movies, and they're talking about movies when they're fighting at the end. That was easily one of my favorite parts of the episode. It's just so funny, and everything about it works. The action in it, and stuff like that. And then Stewie then sees his nanny cam, and he saves Chris after realizing that Chris had planned to give Rupert back. So then after he beats Chris in a fight, just because of how smart he is, then he goes back into the river and saves Chris, which was nice. It was a little bit predictable. I kind of knew it was gonna happen, or I kind of knew Chris was going to be saved, but I kind of didn't know it'd be that way. So it was nice for kind of not being as predictable. This really felt like an American Dad episode, to be honest, and I like that because American Dad is very story driven. It has a huge emphasis on plot. It does have jokes too, but they're not as meta as Family Guys. Like they don't focus too often on cutaways and pop culture. Most of the jokes come from the character dynamics, and that's what I like about this episode a lot. So yeah, I thought this episode was great. It's easily one of my favorites of the season. Great stuff. And at number 2, we have Boy's Best Friend. This is a Brian-focused episode where Brian shows an interest in some girl and they start dating, but he ends up being interested in her son instead. So, and then I think Peter, Quagmire, and Joe want to ride in Joe's uncle's old car. And then Joe doesn't let them, so they go anyway, and then they wreck it. So, surprisingly, this episode has grown on me with a lot of rewatches, mainly because I like the idea that Brian hangs out with a kid instead of, being attached to the girl. Because at first he ends up attached to the girl, which is, oh, okay, it's fine. But then it goes into a kind of different angle where he ends up hanging out with the kid instead, and that's one thing that I really liked about it, mainly because it's different from all the other episodes. I thought this episode was going to be terrible at first, but it ended up surprisingly being good. Well, first I'll start kind of with the subplot before I go back and talk about the main. So, the subplots are typical. The guys hang out, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's okay to kind of turn off your brain and relax to it. It does have that typical "I'm sorry" apology, which is a little annoying, but it doesn't really change the episode. But it was actually pretty funny. I like Peter making the car even in worse condition than it already was, when they're like, oh, how are we gonna fix the car? And he ends up making it worse than it already was, which was surprisingly got a good laugh out of me. I like the ending with the narrator revealing that Brian made Kyle bread and butter. I literally cannot stop laughing at that. That is easily my favorite moment in the season. It's so funny.
Brian made
I cannot
Kyle
stop
bread and
laughing
butter
at that. It's so
and
funny.
kept the pizza money.
like when Holly asks Brian they can order a pizza after she goes out with her ex. They got back together. So then she invites Brian to babysit, and she said, "Oh, order a pizza." Brian made Kyle bread and butter. I can't stop laughing at that joke. It's so funny. And I liked Peter mixing up the car and the uncle. He said he was happy the uncle died, but sorry he got the car. Like, a lot of these jokes are actually really funny. I like seeing Joe pretend to drive the car. That one actually got a good laugh, but there were some of them that were pretty bad, like the Cheesecake Factory one was terrible. The one Peter breaking Quagmire's girl was boring. I didn't like Oscar the Grouch, and then just how Chris wanting Holly to measure his feet again was really gross. And then Meg popping up at Kyle's house, claiming she hosts Family Guy reruns in Germany, which was really stupid. So, yeah, overall this was a pretty good episode, mainly because, yeah, there's an equal amount of funny and unfunny, but at the same time it does have a nice angle, and it's pretty entertaining. So, nice. So, and now we're moving on to my number one favorite episode of Family Guy this season, Wild Wild West. This one is a Peter episode. It's focused on him wanting a new mayor, so he appoints Adam West's cousin. His name is Wild West, and then Lois is opposed to this. So then when Peter goes to Wild West's ranch, then he declines being mayor, and now then Peter decides to bring Lois over so then she can see what a great guy he is, and then conflict happens. So then Peter tries to tarnish his reputation after Lois ends up being sexually interested in him. So, but then he saves Peter from burning library, and then they all make him the new mayor because they all want him. So surprisingly, this is easily the best episode of the season. No contest. It's great. It's grown on me with rewatches. Like, it's probably, like, honestly, I think this episode even surpasses like the best season 18 episodes, to be honest. Mainly because the one thing I like a lot about this episode is because of how like it kind of has continuity. It's very story driven. I don't think it has any cutaways in it like the last one, but it doesn't focus on the bullshit. It just gets straight to the point. The twist was surprisingly nice too. I really liked it. And this is how Family Guy episodes should be, because many of the recent episodes just show how unlikable characters are, or how many jokes they can shove into 22 minutes. But this episode, and as such with other episodes like A Lot Going On Upstairs, Switch the Flip, Big Trouble in Little Quahog, all those episodes do really well with fans because they invest plot over jokes. Old Family Guy used to have a good balance of jokes and story, which is why it's so good. But I think modern Family Guy tends to put the jokes over the story, and that's when the episodes start to fail. Because with a plot device, the jokes kind of center around it. With a good plot device, the jokes come naturally. If there's no plot device, then the jokes could be good or they could be bad. And it's very more likely they're going to be bad. And the one thing that I like about this episode is the jokes come from the plot device, which is great. That being said, it does have some stupid stuff like the Hitler joke, or Peter telling Wild West how many men he's killed according to Reddit. But I did like the twist. It doesn't derail the episode at all. It even ends overall quite nicely with a song. I think the best part, I think one of my favorite jokes is the Jasmine Oolong tea. Well, it wasn't really a joke, but I did like how Peter ends up saying that's his favorite tea because I really like jasmine tea. That's one of my favorite hot teas to drink. So I kind of got a good chuckle out of that. I like seeing Wild West play with the moving mustaches as well. Or was that Peter? I think. And even the ending of the episode is quite nice with Wild West saving Peter from the burning library after he attempts to ruin his reputation and it backfires on him, so Wild West even saves him. And then he becomes the new Quagmire, and they even end up with a song. It's such a nice episode. It's well structured. It's funny. There's no cutaways, no bullshit. All the jokes work, or almost all the jokes work. Like if every episode of Family Guy was close to this, I would actually like the show a lot. But unfortunately, it doesn't really get to that. So I don't say that I don't like Family Guy as a whole, but I really have been starting to care about the show a lot less now. Mainly because mainly because a lot of the episodes end up being really bad, or like just mediocre at best. So like I've honestly kind of stopped caring about the show, but I'll continue to watch it because I love Family Guy as a whole, and I will watch every episode until the show ends, just out of respect. So, as for a season review of Family Guy Season 19, I didn't like Season 19 as a whole. Even the best episodes like Wild West, Mr. Stewie, PeTerminator, like those couldn't save the show from being all that great, mainly because a lot of the episodes of the show end up being terrible, and I kind of didn't like that. But at the same time, I think it does have more better episodes than 18, but it also does have more worse episodes. So I'd probably say it's about the same as 18. I'd probably give it, to be honest, I'd probably give it a C. Yeah, I think a C is a fair score for a season. It wasn't great. Like, if you want that on a scale of a 10, that's probably like a 4.5. So, 4.5 out of 10. It's not a great season. It's not good, but it's certainly one of the bottom seasons. But it's not like season 12 kind of bad. So, in a way, it's fine. It's like mediocre at best. Not a great season, not a good one, but certainly not the worst. So, my thoughts on the best and worst 5 episodes of Family Guy. What did you think about these episodes? Maybe you liked some of them more than me. Maybe leave your list in the comments below. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Laugh and cry.